Yes, I do so. I identify myself as a European, as a German, and as a European at the same time, and I don't see any contradiction in that. Well, when I'm in the US and I'm asked where I come from, I say I come from Europe and more particular from Germany and more particular from the southwest of Germany and so on. It is a geographical identity, but at the same time, for instance, my forefathers come from Turkey. When I have discussions with friends from Turkey and we discuss about values, I use the phrase European values in order to describe the values of enlightenment, values of the French Revolution, of division between state and religion. So it is a political description as well, based on values, on European values. One very important moment for me was when I was going to school and my school class was having an exchange program with England, with a school class there. And I joined that group, and on our way to England through Belgium, I had to leave the train because I did not have a transit visa. I was the only guy in the school class not having a German passport because as I said already, my parents came from Turkey. I'm a child of so-called guest workers. And until that day, I didn't have a German passport because at that time, there was no such thing as birthrights in Germany. I was involved in that legislation when I became a legislator many years later. But I will not forget that moment when the police officers were very friendly to all kids. And once I had to show my Turkish passport, their face expression changed and they asked for transit visa. I even did not know that word because I was born and raised in that country. So I was never aware that I need a visa in order to travel from one European country to another European country. That was pre-Schengen, many years pre-Schengen. So to make a long story short, this was a very defining moment for me. And on a positive side, I would say when I witnessed Pulse of Europe, when I witnessed Fridays for Future, and I saw young people taking over the idea of Europe, the idea of values that we share, or many of us share, and that these kids go to street not to demonstrate for instance, like the yellow vests against the state, or in order to destroy something, but in order to call the state for action, to call the state official to just do their job. And that was a very positive, motivating moment. To me, there's no doubt that the genocide taking place in former Yugoslavia, in particular in Bosnia, was the worst moment for the European Union. Although it was not a member state of the European Union, but it was based in Europe. And the genocide happened a few hours away from where I was living in the southwest of Germany at that time. And that the European Union was not able to stop that genocide. We were divided along the same lines as in the First World War. The French, the British on the side of the Serbs, the Germans on the side of the Croatians, and practically nobody on the side of the people in Bosnia. And they were not looking towards Saudi Arabia. They were looking towards us because they felt that we're their brothers and sisters as Europeans. And we just did nothing. We just watched the genocide happening. We just watched the torture camps, the rape camps for women. And this is a very important moment for me for two reasons. First of all, because it was a shame for us Europeans after the Second World War, pretending that we had learned the lesson, and we showed that we had learned practically nothing. And the second shame was me as a person coming from a Muslim family, always believing in enlightenment, always believing in the division of church or religion and state and the French Revolution, everything, seeing and asking myself, what would have happened the other way around? I guess if the Bosnians would have attacked the Serbs or the Croatians and committed the genocide vis-a-vis the Christians in Serbia or in Croatia, how long would it have taken the Brits, the French, the Germans, and others to take action? So the the things that I learned from my great teachers, that Europe is not based on ethnicity, it's not based on religion, it's not based on confession, it's based on values. Well, that was not practiced in Bosnia. Well, this is a very personal answer. I was elected to the European Parliament in 2004, and that was the same year when 10 now member states of the European Union entered the European Union, and 8 of them were coming from the former eastern part of Europe, belonging to the former Eastern Bloc, and now members of the European Union. To see that happening, together with the collapse of the Berlin Wall some years before, the collapse of the Iron Curtain, was certainly one of the most beautiful moments. So as I already said, what happened to me when I was going to school really was important. That was pre-Schengen, and so Schengen is really a landmark. It's extremely important for the European Union. And the second single thing would be the invention of the Eurozone, because I have now kids, and for them it's hard to imagine a pre-Eurozone world for them. I would say that the European Union reaches its climate targets for 2030 to reduce the emissions on 25% or even beyond that. That would be such a great thing. And then that the right lessons are drawn by the member states from the Brexit experience. That would be a second important thing. And then that the European Union practices what it's preaching. With that, I mean freedom of press, rule of law, that is practiced in all member states of the European Union. And finally, that the European Union would become a serious foreign actor on the international stage when it comes to human rights, rule of law, fight against climate change, and so on. Well, I think in a democracy, you have to explain, you have to convince your voters. And if you manage to do so, then it's a more long-lasting and a more convincing change in habits and in policies than if a authoritarian state just tells you what you have to do and what you should not do. So, because you don't do it then because you're convinced. So therefore, I think democracies are better equipped. But of course, it forces us to use our means and to really go out and convince. Well, it's not fully surprising, because if we've seen the last 4 years in the US, which obviously is a democracy, and how that democracy decided to phase out of the Paris Agreement, obviously one can have questions, but the answer to those questions is not that authoritarian regimes are better prepared, certainly not. Well, I'm very worried, but the good news is that slowly the European Union is waking up. We have now a new strong, or we will get very soon a new strong partner in the US again with the Biden-Harris administration. And the good news is that even within Poland and Hungary, people are going to the streets, are making demonstrations. The opposition is trying to unite. So the sooner or later, I'm deeply convinced that democracy will come back, liberal democracy will come back even in those countries. But it's important that we don't leave our friends alone, that we support them and put pressure on those regimes, on those administrations. I think the most important thing is that we practice what we preach. I mean, just take the fight against terrorism some years ago after 9/11. It's hard to tell other regimes that are corrupt, that are human rights abusers, that they should stop to do so. If we made people disappear, if we were in charge of human rights abuses in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and elsewhere. So because we're the West, we have to behave different. Well, it's certainly a success because it's in front pages of newspapers and so on. But this will not help us with those people who are skeptical already, who believe that migration is a wrong thing, or believe that this pandemic is not existing. So it doesn't make a difference for them whether the people who invent the medicine are of German origin or of Turkish origin or whatever. If you are a believer in conspiracy theories, it doesn't make a difference, who invented the necessary means to fight against the pandemic. So therefore, the battle is not a battle between those who are of non-German origin and of German origin. The battle is between those who believe in enlightenment, who believe in modern democracy and liberal democracy, and between those who are Eurosceptic, who are non-believers in liberal democracy, who believe that closed societies are better. And these people are sometimes of German origin, of Turkish origin, of Hungarian origin, of Polish origin, whatsoever. So it's not a line drawn between nations, between religions. It's a line drawn between those who believe in the modern world, in the Western world and its values, and those who don't. In a nutshell, I would say the most important thing is end discrimination. Give everybody the opportunity to develop its potential. Whether it's men or women, whether it's gays, lesbians, heterosexuals, whether it's people of color, whether it's whites, whatever. Everybody should be able to develop its potential without being stopped because of race, gender, income, or whatsoever. This is written in our European basic rule, and it's practically in all our constitutions, and we just have to practice that. What I just said has a lot of implications. It has the implication that you should have the best schools, the best public schools, the best public kindergarten, in particular in those neighborhoods where people live that have lower income, people like where I was born and raised, people of color, that they have the best schools in order to develop their potential, because we do not have the same opportunities when we start in the first grade. Some of us have parents who could help them in school. I didn't have that privilege. I didn't have the privilege that my parents could help me with the language. They could not help me with homework. They could help me with practically nothing. So therefore, in order to achieve that goal, you need to develop the means for that. That means that you have to invest a lot of money for schools, for social justice, and so on. But you first have to define the goal. Then you can agree on the means that you need for it. And I doubt whether we really agree on the goals. That's why I insist on the goals, because if these are the goals, it has very clear political implications on how you spend your budget on all levels, on the local level, on the regional level, on the national level, and obviously also on the European level. Well, first, the voters have to decide, obviously, but I hope that the Greens will be part of the next government. If that is so, I would love to see Germany mainstreamed with the European Union together, and hopefully with a lot of our European partners and the US in the fight against climate change, because we missed many years, the US completely the last 4 years, but Europe also was very slow compared to what we could have done, what could have been done. So therefore, that would be my first priority. And my second priority would be to fight back authoritarian regimes and authoritarian representatives, both in our own countries, in some of the member states, but also the attacks from outside. And if I talk about the attacks from outside, there's one center, and that is obviously Mr. Putin and his propaganda machinery. So therefore, it's clear that we have to defend ourselves and make very clear that we do not accept that a foreign power like Mr. Putin wants to change election results, wants to support nationalist and crazy movements in our countries, or is trying to support ideas like Brexit. That is a clear attack towards the European Union, and the European Union has to wake up and defend itself. I think it's a mixture of personal behavior and political measures. Uh, we will not change things for good if we just abstain from flying, because this is not going to happen. Some of us, like myself, my wife's family comes from Argentina. It's very hard to swim to Argentina or to use the train to Argentina. Obviously, that's not possible. So therefore, we have to fly. So we need to have uh, flights in the future that have less carbon emissions, or one day will be completely carbon free. So that is very important, to invest money on research to develop alternatives for fuels. And of course, the other very important means is the car manufacturing industry. Europe should be the center of electric cars, should be the center of cars that are phasing out of fossil fuel power. And the next, obviously, is that we have to strengthen public transport. We should be the world masters with public transport, with bikes, and giving citizens back opportunities to travel from A to B with train, with bus, without the need for cars. And on short and mid travels, there is no reason to fly within Germany if you have fast trains. We could reinvent, which is already done by Austria, and thanks for Austria for doing that, by the night train system. Unfortunately, my country, Germany, phased out of the night train system. I think it's a perfect thing, not only for young people to travel from one European town to another European town. So invest in public transport, make sure that the space is redivided, redistributed in our cities. You should not depend on cars. You should have alternatives if you want to move from A to B, and invest in research that wherever we rely on flights, wherever we rely on cars, that we have alternatives that are less harmful for the environment. It plays already a very helpful role, and it should even have a stronger role. Unfortunately, the role that it's playing right now on reduction of climate gases, it's not playing the same role in agriculture policy. I'm very disappointed with what has presented so far.